In 1991, Sega had its answer to Final Fight in Streets of Rage. It was known as Bare Knuckle in Japan, and it used a similar blueprint to Capcom's masterpiece to build a brand new beat-em-up just for Genesis owners. Sega got Revenge of Shinobi's composer on board to do the honors for the music, and when it hit the market, it was lavished with critical acclaim. I absolutely loved it myself, and it quickly rose up the ranks as one of my favorite games for the Genesis platform. It was a massive hit for Sega, so they quickly got a Part 2 into development for release the following year. Sega CS would once again be part of development, and with the project being significantly larger, they'd get help from Ancient and a few other smaller developers to make it happen. The product they put out was released in December of 1992, and it's one of the finest games ever made. Streets of Rage 2 had some pretty big shoes to fill following the first. Sega could have just recycled the same great gameplay, but they instead went a few steps further. You still have the same basic arsenal as before. You attack with your standard combo of punches and kicks, you have your standard jump attacks that change depending on whether you are moving or not, and you can still attack behind you. Also returning is the ability to land on your feet when thrown, as well as your grapple system. This affords you a new set of options such as additional combos and throws. Sega decided to axe the call for police backup from the first, instead giving us a new special attack system. The first of these is a standard special that you can do anytime you want without penalty. It's pulled off by pressing forward attack and hits multiple times. The second set of specials is more restrictive but can be devastating in their execution. These are tied directly to their own special button. Hit that button by itself and you sort of get a nuke attack that hits everything in front and behind you. Press forward in the special button and you get a second version that is often radically different. Beware, however, your special attacks take life each and every time you use them. The really cool thing about all that is that you now have 4 characters that you can use all those moves with. Axel and Blaze make their triumphant return, joined by newcomers Skate and Max. Skate is the little brother of Adam and Max is a friend of Axel's. While each of these characters do share the same input methods for their movesets, they are radically different in practice. Not only do they have their own stats for things like power, speed, and stamina, but each of their moves vary radically in style and effectiveness. Skate is small and fast but does little damage. Max is powerful but slow. Adam is completely missing in this game thanks to the story. It seems Mr. X is back and he's taken Adam prisoner, and his new gangs are ready to rain absolute vengeance on the city. That means you of course have to stop him, and you'll battle across 8 stages to do it. You'll start downtown, work your way across the bridge, deal with punks in an amusement park and a stadium before you make your final run on a ship, in a jungle, and finally, Mr. X's weapons plant and stronghold. The 2-player co-op is of course back, as is a new duel mode where you can practice all these new moves with a friend. The first Streets of Rage came on a tiny 4 megabit cartridge, a byproduct of its time. Streets of Rage 2 here comes on a comparatively massive 16 megabit cart, a full 4 times increase in size. Sega needed all that extra memory because they wanted to make this new entry as pretty as they possibly could. The results are spectacular too. Gone are the tiny sprites of the original, now replaced by massive heroes and villains that easily fill up the screen. Backgrounds have been given a big facelift as well. You get a lot more detail, there are some cool new touches like foreground scrolling and some nice line and parallax effects. The animation sees some major increases across the board as well. Not only does everyone walk and fight smoother, but there's a lot more bad guys on top of that. You get the usual grunts of course, but you also get a nice mix of henchmen that vary in fight style and moves. It makes for a heck of a lot to see and do, making the first seem like it was a generation apart. The 8 stages you play across have a nice amount of scenery change-ups to complement the new engine. Every area has its own look and ambiance about it, and you'll notice few repeated assets beyond the enemies. Perhaps the most impressive aspect of all of that is just how much more colorful everything is. It's not like the first one was a slouch in that area, but everything about it has been brightened up here and then some. In my humble opinion, this is one of the most dramatic improvements any series pulled off during that generation of software. Streets of Rage had an incredible soundtrack. I mean, it was the kind of stuff you could listen to over and over in and out of the game. That was thanks to the great Yuzo Koshiro and his masterclass control over FM synth. He wove a tapestry of aural goodness that still gives me goosebumps today. It was only right for him to return and make sweet sweet love to our ears in part 2, and thankfully, he delivers another epic performance. I could continue to swing from this man's sack for another 20 minutes or so, but instead I'll spare you the long-winded soliloquy and let you hear it for yourselves. Playing Streets of Rage 2 for the first time was a shock to say the least. I had loved Part 1, even preferred its gameplay to many other popular beat-em-ups at the time. But Sega outdid themselves with this one. Not only did they get the Neo Geo-like upgrade to the visuals and Yuzo's killer tunes, but that gameplay saw just as big an improvement. Every attack lands with a perfect smack, a satisfying stun, and ultimately, your foe collapsing to the ground in screen-shaking defeat. The 4 playable characters offer up gameplay that is very much their own too. No 2 play alike. Hell, no 2 even play similar. And I'm not talking just in terms of speed or how much life they take. I'm also talking about style and effectiveness on different enemies. Some bad guys can block regular attacks, some can power right through your specials, and some can even counter you before you even land the first punch. I think much of the appeal of this one is that it gives you the ability to deal with all that how you want. Prefer the power guy popping off uppercuts left and right? He's there. Want the small guy that whips around the screen getting his beat down on in style? You got that too. Moving through the game world, you are also met with some crazy places to do battle in. It feels like a journey as you move through town, eventually taking a ship that puts you on the trail of where Mr. X has been hiding out. Of course, all of that is made better by the 2-player co-op that runs perfectly the entire time. My only real complaint is that Adam isn't playable. As my favorite character in Part 1, I understood the need to have him as a story element, but he still could have been an unlockable or something. To omit him entirely from gameplay was a real downer. Aside from that little irritation, Streets of Rage 2 is about as perfect as a 16-bit brawler can be. Sega wasn't afraid to bring Streets of Rage 2 to its 8-bit platform, surprisingly. The first of these hit the Game Gear in 1993. Of course, it had no hope of looking as good as the 16-bit powered edition, but Sega's portable still did an admirable job all the same. The gameplay is surprisingly tight, and most of the moves are here. They even added a special attack that wasn't in the Genesis version. Yuzo was back for the sound in this one, making for a damn good beat-em-up on the go. following year, Europe, Brazil, and Korea all got the Master System port, which was actually not just a redux of the portable version. And while I normally praise there being different versions for every Sega platform, this one is actually quite a bit weaker than the others. It doesn't look or play as well as the Game Gear release. The animation is kinda janky, the hit detection feels off, and the enemies move around too fast. It's not broken, but between the two, I'd prefer the Game Gear take every single time. The legacy of Streets of Rage 2 is undeniable. Whether you grew up a Sega fan or not, the quality of this game's programming is god tier in the land of 4th generation hardware. It's a tour de force of graphics, sound, and gameplay, and easily stands out as a star of the beat-em-up genre. While the first game was memorable in its own right, the improvements here take it to another level. In a way, it's kind of a shame because the product was so well done, the sequel had a nearly insurmountable task in front of it. How do you improve on perfection? How do you take something so well designed and make it feel new again? All Sega could pretty much do is give us more of the same or try something radically different, paths that would disappoint some people no matter what. Despite the critical and commercial success of Streets of Rage 2, Sega only gave us one more game in the series before giving up on it completely. That third release never saw a sequel on the Saturn or Dreamcast, a despicable fact if there's ever been one in the hobby of gaming. How does a company not iterate on such a fan-beloved favorite? Would it have been difficult? Sure, but how do you leave behind the software that spurred on millions of imaginations and helped build the foundation of all your successes? Just imagine if Nintendo had left Mario, Zelda, Metroid, or Donkey Kong on the NES never to be heard from again. It would take over 20 years before we finally received a sequel to the 16-bit series known as Streets of Rage, a reality that still baffles me to this very day. I'm Sega Lord X, thank you guys for watching, and I will catch you next time.